Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Pound, and I am here with the final video for Chapter 20 on human anatomy and physiology. And this section is Section 20D from your textbook on the muscular system. So, our objectives for today are to compare the three types of human muscle, describe the structures of a typical skeletal muscle fiber, differentiate between muscle origin and muscle insertion, and describe the function of muscle groups. So, the first thing I want to take a look at is some muscle anatomy. And there are three types of muscle tissue we're going to talk about. The first is skeletal muscle. These are the muscles that are attached to your bones and they are striated. What that means is, do you see these lines here? Those are called striations. They are voluntary muscles. That means you can think about moving them. You move them consciously. That are attached to bones, like the muscles in the fingers, the muscles in your arms, your legs. There's also smooth muscle. This is involuntary muscle. This is muscle you don't have to think about moving or for its functions. And it's found in the walls of the internal organs, like the digestive system and blood vessels. It's a good thing we don't have to think about all of those body functions, or we wouldn't be able to think about anything else. It's a good thing that we have involuntary muscles that just perform actions for us. One of those types of involuntary muscles, a special type of smooth muscle, are sphincter muscles. The bottom of the stomach here is the pyloric sphincter. They act as valves, and these are circular bundles of muscles that regulate the diameter of tubular organs and openings. So, this pyloric sphincter, the sphincter muscle, will open and close the bottom of the stomach to let food pass into the small intestines. There's also cardiac muscle. This is muscle that is only in your heart. It is striated, so it's not as easy to see, but in this picture, but you can see the lines through the muscle fibers, and it is striated and involuntary. Again, you do not have to think about your heart beating. It just beats. Now let's take a look at some muscle structure. So, muscle is made of myofibrils. These are fine threads that make up muscles. Sometimes we call them muscle fibers. So, inside this muscle fiber actually are these myofibrils that make up those muscle fibers. There are two types of protein filaments found in muscle cells. They are actin and myosin. And we can see in the picture, the actin is the blue and the myosin is the red, and they act together to contract and relax muscles. An important structure in the myofibrils are the sarcomeres, and this is the distance from one Z line to another. We can see here that the actin and myosin, at the ends of them, there's this Z going down there. Those are the Z lines. And so this distance here from one Z line to another would be a sarcomere. So let's talk about muscle physiology, how muscles function. So the source of energy for muscle contraction are ATP molecules. Just like any activity in the body, our bodies are energized by ATP, converting ATP to ADP, releasing energy.
After a great deal of exercise, muscle fatigue is caused in part by a buildup of lactic acid. This is because you will switch from aerobic respiration to anaerobic respiration. And remember earlier in class when we made sauerkraut, that the lactic acid was a result of anaerobic respiration. And our bodies can do the same thing, except it has some side effects. First of all, your muscles become very tired because they're not as efficient, they're not getting as much ATP, and that lactic acid can also cause muscle cramps.
Now, some advantages of humans' ability to build up oxygen debt. So, we can go into this anaerobic type respiration, and it has some advantages for us. One is the buildup of oxygen debt is necessary for the body when it reaches the limit of available oxygen for a particular level of activity. For instance, marathon runners run a lot and they have to be able to build this up. If humans did not have the ability to build up oxygen debt, they would have to stop physical activity soon after becoming winded. So, if a runner became winded, they would just have to stop. They would not be able to push through. Since man is an aerobic organism, he can repay that oxygen debt as he rests from activity. So it is important for you to rest after activity. And in fact, it is also important to have rest days built into your regular exercise routines. As he becomes conditioned for a particular activity, he is able to perform longer before building up oxygen debt. So, this is something that can be built up, especially in marathon runners. They don't just start out running those huge distances, they start gradually. They start with walking and then jogging short distances and build that up over time. So, let's talk about some muscles and body movement. So, on muscles, there is a spot on the muscle called the origin, and this is the attachment of a muscle or tendon to a more stationary bone. So, in the background, you see a picture of an arm, and in the arm, you have the humerus, which is the top bone, and you have the ulna down here with also the radius. Now, the origin attaches to the more stationary bone. If you look at your arm, the humerus is more stationary. It's the ulna and the radius that are moving. So the biceps, which move the ulna, are their origin is in the humerus. The insertion is the attachment of the other muscle tendon to the more movable bone. So the origin is in the humerus. The insertion is in the ulna because that is the bone that is doing the motion. Now, one important thing to know is that muscles can only pull, they never push. So we can see that, okay, I pull a muscle, it goes that way. Well, how do I extend my muscle back out? Well, that's because muscles work in groups. So on the top, we have the bicep, which is pulling the bones this way. On the bottom, we have the tricep, which when it contracts, it pulls your arm out. Now we have muscles called prime movers. These are muscles performing the action. So in this case, it's the bicep. It's the muscle that bends your arm. There are also synergist muscles that assist the prime mover. You have muscles, your pectoral muscles and everything, and your shoulders and in your chest that actually assist that bicep in also moving your arm. Those are called synergist. Then you have the antagonist. This is the muscle that performs the opposite action of the prime mover. So the antagonist would be the triceps. So, a few muscles I would like you to know for the test are in the leg, and those are the sartorius that goes diagonally across here, the rectus femoris, which covers the femur, and that is the wrong label. Some muscles I would like you to know for the test are the sartorius, which goes diagonally across here. Also, the rectus femoris. You'll remember that because it's covering the femur. And finally, down here, the tibialis anterior. So it goes across the tibia, which is one of the bones in the lower leg, and anterior means it's on top. So that will help you to remember that muscle. And there are many more. There are so more. We just cannot study all of them. If you were to take a class in anatomy and physiology, you would learn about all of the muscles. Now, some muscle disorders that you may come across. The first disorder and disease that I want you to know about is myalgia. Myalgia is muscle pain due to a muscular disorder or disease. Maybe you've heard of fibromyalgia. This disease, doctors don't necessarily know what's causing it, but it is characterized by myalgia, which is muscle pain. And I believe they probably get the fibra from it because of naming it after muscle fibers. So it is pain in the muscle fibers. Also, you can get myalgia by maybe if you've ever had Lyme disease. You can get severe muscle pain. Muscle aches and pains from having the flu would be myalgia. There's also atrophy. This is reduction in the size of muscle tissue due to a decrease in mitochondria, protein, and capillaries. So here is a nice, healthy, normal muscle. Over here is a thin, atrophied muscle. Maybe if you've broken a bone and had to have a cast, you've experienced muscle atrophy after getting that cast off. Your muscle is a lot smaller. If you don't use your muscles, you'll lose them to atrophy. Also, you can have convulsions. A convulsion is a violent involuntary contraction of an entire group of muscles. These happen when you have, say, a seizure. That's why I have the brain in the background because seizures start in the brain. Um, so they will cause these convulsions. Also, paralysis due to many different things. Maybe somebody has had a spinal cord injury. Maybe they're born paralyzed for some reason, but it's the inability to move muscles. And so, thankfully, we have things like wheelchairs to help those people get around. But paralysis is the inability to move muscles. It can also be due to maybe somebody having a stroke as well. Spasms. Maybe you've experienced a muscle spasm. These are short involuntary muscle contractions. They can hurt. They happen really fast. It feels like your muscles going back and forth like this, and it can be painful. It's not quite the same as a muscle cramp because the muscles, like I said, are going back and forth really fast. So, our objectives today are to compare the three types of human muscle, describe the structures of a typical skeletal muscle fiber, differentiate between muscle origin and muscle insertion, and describe the function of muscle groups. Don't forget your 5 questions and start preparing for your test.